Another great day. Welcome to Tanzania Today, your weekly program that looks into the issues of national and regional interest that is affecting the nation. That is Tanzania and the region as well today and tomorrow. My name is Nasa Kingo. Post-independence era, Tanzania had one of the most vibrant and firm foreign policy with a focus on Pan-Africanism, economic independence, non-alignment, and international solidarity. Now, with time, Tanzania keeps on changing its foreign policy, improving and revising it, culminating into the newest foreign policy, which was launched recently in May this year, 2025, by the President of the United Republic of Tanzania, President Dr. Samia Suluhu Hassan. A lot of questions have been raised, issues also on the table, and to answer all the questions and clear all the doubts, today, Tanzania Today is joined by the man who is in charge of Tanzania's economic diplomacy policy, none other than Ambassador John Ulanga. Ambassador, welcome to Tanzania Today.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And to discuss the issue as well, we're joined by renowned political analyst Issa Omar. Welcome to Tanzania Today.
Thanks for having me.
Ambassador Ulanga, Tanzania's foreign policy have been revised recently. We understand we want to put more emphasis on the issue of economy. How revised foreign policy consolidates Tanzania's intentions to place the economy at the center of its foreign engagement?
Thank you. Thank you so much. First, I think I should appreciate for the invitation and the discussion. I think this is a very topical issue that needs to be discussed, interrogated, and clarified if there are issues for clarification.
Yes.
First, I really appreciate your background in terms of Tanzania foreign policy evolving over time. And you have talked about post-independence foreign policy of our country. I usually like to tell people our first foreign policy position came before independence, when Mwalimu Nyerere, by then the president of Tanganyika African National Union, was making an address at the Tanganyika Legislative Council, LEGICO, on October 22nd, 1959. He said, "We, the people of Tanganyika, would like to light a torch and put it on the top of Mount Kilimanjaro, which would shine beyond our borders, giving a hope where there was despair, love where there was hate, and dignity where there was before only humiliation." That captured African imagination. It captured the attention of the continent, of the pre-independence Africa, knowing that Tanganyika by then is positioning itself to be a continental player in its foreign policy. And therefore, of course, after independence, that's what you said rightly. We had the Presidential Circular number 2 in 1964. The Arusha Declaration itself was a very strong foreign policy pronouncement. 1969, there was also a government policy position on foreign policy. And of course, then 2001, there was now a formal Tanzania national foreign policy. And now the one that has been launched recently, which was actually a 2024 version of the foreign policy, has now given us a strategic or historic shift. Not that it's a complete change from the previous positions. Some positions remain the same, but things like the African liberation in the 90s, especially after South Africa's multi-party and multi-racial election, we almost reached the point of saying mission accomplished in terms of our mission for African liberation, especially the southern part of Africa. And therefore, a new set of issues started to emerge. If you look at the 2001 policy, it mentioned economic diplomacy as one of the emerging issues. Now, the historic shift that came from the 2024 version is really putting economic diplomacy as the cornerstone or the foundation or the bedrock of our foreign policy. So this is quite historic, that now our number one priority in our foreign policy is economic diplomacy. Now there are other pillars to this, but they're all anchored around economic diplomacy. And therefore, it means it redefines the way we would want to engage with the international community, whether it is countries or other types of international organizations. It redefines the type of people that we would want to position in our diplomatic service, in our missions. It defines the alliance that we want to see between local policies or national policies and our international engagement. So this is very historic, that for the first time, everything that we would want to do in foreign policy or in foreign service is prioritizing economic diplomacy. And you'll see, because it creates now for the first time both an institutional mechanism and strategies to be put in place to really implement economic diplomacy. So it is historic, and I think it aligns with the priorities of today and our vision towards 2050.
You've been in charge of Tanzania's economic diplomacy for over a year, I think.
For now, 2 years.
Now for 2 years.
Yeah.
What have been the major success stories for the last 2 years?
First, it is for the first time in the history of our foreign policy and foreign affairs ministry to have a dedicated department. The Department for Economic Diplomacy is only now about 3 going to 4 years old. It actually was created after the coming into place of the administration of Her Excellency President Tanzania'S, which means it is putting into practice her policy ambitions that we want to prioritize economic diplomacy. So, they say nothing is possible without people, but nothing will last without institutions. So you are creating an institutional mechanism. So the first success story is first an institutional mechanism. But number 2, and a set of very tangible success stories, because when you talk about economic diplomacy, we prioritize 3 to 4, a couple of things, but let me just talk about 3 to 4 things. We prioritize attracting investment. We prioritize increasing the value and the volume of exports to our countries, so increasing access to international markets. We prioritize increasing the number of tourists. Of course, it's part of trade, but tourism is very specific. But also, we also want to prioritize technical cooperation, both in terms of expertise, but also in terms of financial support to areas of technical cooperation. Now, if you look at the last 3-4 years, since the president came into power and since she made her first policy pronouncement that we want to prioritize economic diplomacy, even before the actual revision of the policy came into place. If you are to count that, we are seeing massive success, first in the area of investment. For last year alone, for 2024, the amount or the number of projects or the value of projects that were registered at through our investment institution were valued at around $7.7 billion. That is the highest value of projects that have been registered historically since the establishment of the authority. But related to that, if you actually look at the actual foreign direct investments, the actual cash inflow that came into the country was around $1.7 billion. That's also historic high. So you could see massive increase in foreign investment. If you look at exports, for 2024, the value of exports from Tanzania to other countries totally was around $16 billion. That is also a massive increase if you compare to the years before. If you look at tourists, if I'm going back to exports, especially, let alone gold, but if you look at agriculture exports, they've also reached a historic high of around $3.5 billion in total, led by things like cashew nuts, if you look at increase of exports in cashew nuts, but also coffee. Now, if you look at tourism, again, the contribution of tourism now, I think, is almost the #1 export product of our country, even surpassing mining sector, both in terms of value, but also if you look at the number of tourists coming to the country. So I can say we can talk till the end of the day, but we can see massive success in terms of the priorities that the country has in the areas of investment, in the areas of exports, in the areas of tourism, also in the areas of technical cooperation in strategic projects that we know of.
Back to you, Mr. Omar. As a political analyst, what do you think of the Tanzania's new foreign policy? Do you think has given a new impetus to the idea of putting focus on the issue of economy?
I think
at the center,
it has given the country's foreign policy and foreign engagements a new impetus. Because, of course, the policy areas, we have 10 policy areas, but economic diplomacy takes the center stage. And actually, it links diplomacy, it links diplomacy to national priorities, like we talked about tourism, blue economy, youth empowerment, regional trade, regional peace building, and so on and so forth. But we have to remember also, it tries to adapt the country into global shifts in order to meet the emerging challenges. And as far as global politics is concerned, we have three competing and contradictory processes that are currently shaping global politics and global political economy generally. You have globalization in the form of globalism, you have regionalism, and you have nationalism. And therefore, how the country can navigate in these turbulent international waters, then you need to have an effective policy that effectively, proactively respond to these changes. And I think our new foreign policy, our revised foreign policy, especially with diplomacy as the is driving its engine, it has tried to do that. And actually, it intends also to transform our foreign service as an engine, a driving force for the country's foreign engagement. And for instance, the ambassador here talked about how this new diplomacy has managed to attract foreign direct investment. Actually, the country, since 2021, when this administration came to power, the country has secured $15 billion in foreign investment pledges. But again, it's not only that, but also using our foreign service and foreign missions as also avenues for exporting capital. And actually, I wish to commend the government for they are currently investing in real estate development abroad. For instance, they recently launched a project in Nairobi, Upper Hill, investing, constructing real estate twin towers, these twin towers, partly because to reduce government costs in terms of operating, renting spaces for foreign mission, but also to leverage on that as an economic and investment opportunity. And actually it targeted to increase the government revenue by 36 billion Tanzanian shillings, because the government has been spending around 29 billion in trying to run these foreign missions that we have abroad. And therefore that is also a good initiative. Again, it also tries to promote regional trade. Regional trade, especially with the launching of the Kuala Dry Port, actually is one of mega projects.
Yeah, and that was actually my next question that I wanted to ask about how Tanzania's new foreign policy, with a focus on economic diplomacy, is aligning with the rest of the policies, especially across the region, across the continent, and global as well.
So it does align very much because you are talking about, as I said, trade in the service sector is the fastest and the largest growing segment of the global economy. And actually it contributes to around 67% of GDP, according to the World Bank, and it employs around 50% of world's workforce. And therefore, although in Tanzania and also in the East African region, the service sector is still underutilized, and therefore the coming of Kuala Dry Port will boost, especially in terms of transport services, trying to increase the country comparative, but also national competitiveness, comparative advantage and national competitiveness, as well as integrating it into global and regional value chains. And actually very important. But also again, also trying to also increase trade in services around the region, particularly with the EAC and also SADC countries. As you know, as part of the Vision 2050, the country attempts to be a trade and logistical hub by mid-century, and therefore this Kuala Diport and the other infrastructure development that we've witnessed, including the SGR, connecting the Great Lakes with the Central Corridor, as well as investing more in shipbuilding and also cargo transit around the major lakes that we have will also contribute much to the national development. But what is really important also is regional peace building, because as you know that we're in a region that is highly fragile because of protracted conflicts, and actually there is a conflict formation unfolding connecting the Great Lakes, the Nile Basin, the Congo Basin, the Nile Basin, and the Horn of Africa. And therefore, investing in enhancing regional peace is very important, especially in the Eastern DRC. As we know, now we have major players who are coming in trying to compete, China with the Belt and Road Initiative and the US with the Lobito Corridor. And actually, I really sympathize with the people who live and who have lived in the DRC, because they have been at war and subject to other forms of violence for the last 400 years since the start of the Atlantic slave trade. And therefore, Congo has not been at peace itself. Therefore, we have not been able, it has untapped opportunities, but we have not been able to capitalize on such opportunities because of ongoing political instability. And therefore, investing in peace, that is very important in order to encourage intra-regional trade, as well as leverage both on the EAC, as well as the African continental trade area and the SADC trade bloc.
Yes, Ambassador Ulanga, I want to now let's discuss about one of the most debated issue, the issue of diaspora. Sure. We understand when the new foreign policy was launched, we actually picked that the focus will be mainly on the issue of economy and diaspora as well, engagement in terms of to the national, their contribution to the national development. How the Tanzania's economic diplomacy has positioned itself in relation to the new foreign policy, which was launched just this year, to tap into the diaspora's potentials to the fullest and clear all the doubts and the questions regarding diaspora's engagement in the Tanzania's economic development.
Thank you so much. You will appreciate or agree with me that for the longest, there has been quite a lot of discussions on what should and could be the role of diaspora in national development. And especially because of the historical background, there's always been this tension between the contribution that diaspora can bring to the country and what other people might also think as the potential risk that the people in the diaspora, because of a different perception of what it means being a diaspora. Why did you become a diaspora in the first place? Where is your loyalty, you say, and things of that sort. But for the first time, as part of that historic shift that I talked about, the foreign policy has recognized the diaspora community as a strategic partner to national development. That whether these people are still citizens or they are no longer citizens, but they have Tanzanian origin, you see, we still would want to collaborate with them to contribute to national development. So for the first time, we are recognizing them as strategic partner, and the policy framework, and even in discussions with the legislators, one of the discussions about the role of the diaspora was how is the foreign policy recognizing their contribution. So once the foreign policy was completed and it recognized the role of the diaspora, it means they are strategic partners, they can invest in property, in land, they can come to work with us. So now that debate at government level is over. There is now consensus. Now the next stage now is to deal with the legal requirements, legislative changes, and especially on two areas. One, the Land Act, to ensure that it recognizes the diaspora as one of the special class of people who can benefit from ownership of land. And number two is around immigration, in terms of their entry, their stay, and their exit. So the foreign policy has given them or has provided for them to be given special status, which we are saying this special status gives them so many benefits, almost equal to a citizen, that will make them comfortable and capable to come in Tanzania with their capital, with their skills, and collaborate with Tanzanians, getting probably better access than foreign investors, you see, and with just limitations probably around political participation, etc. But in terms of economic participation, the foreign policy, and the upcoming legislative changes will really provide for the room that they would want.
As a political analyst, Issa Omar, do you think the special status that has been given to Tanzania's diaspora enough? Have we fully exploited what the diaspora can offer to Tanzania?
First, we have to agree, and of course also remind our viewers that one of the most polarizing issues in our foreign policy has been the question of diaspora, especially non-citizen diaspora, because we have two categories of diaspora. We have citizen diaspora and non-citizen diaspora. And there are two competing positions. One is that whether we should go for dual citizenship in order to accommodate them as strategic partners, in order to harness the power of diaspora for national development, including leveraging the expertise for economic development and also attract investment. Secondly, they say that we should treat them as just like any other foreigner. So the consensus has been that as part of consensus building is that we should settle midway, and that has been on the issue of granting them special status in order to leverage, as I say, their economic potential. And actually, in Africa, most African countries have been the continent actually has been benefiting from remittances from Africa's diasporic community. And actually, in 2022, it was estimated to be around the flow of these resources from diaspora, from remittances, was around $95 billion. And it was projected to reach $100 billion by 2024. And actually, this is more than 5% of the continent's combined GDP. And also, it's twice the amount of aid resources, especially from ODA, Official Development Assistance, that the country has been receiving over that period. And what is interesting, actually, in Africa is that now we have this intra-African mobility and diaspora. Of course, according to the AU, you have 70,000 Africans going, professional Africans going out of outside Africa annually, but you have millions also moving within the continent, and therefore both Tanzanian diaspora outside Africa and those within Africa, they provide promising opportunity for the country's development. But in the past, one of the problems was that we did not have a coordinated approach on how to engage this Tanzania's diasporic community abroad there. But recently, with the coming of economic, our orientation now towards economic diplomacy, now we are trying to develop a framework on how to engage them, but also leverage them, their economic potential, especially in, of course, remittances, but also in mobilizing for, private capital for investment. But also they can also be a gateway for also exporting capital abroad. And therefore, that has been one of the strategic moves. Another strategic move also, they will help us expand access to international labor markets, whether through bilateral labor agreements, like the one we have been signing with the Gulf countries in the Near East, the Middle East, but also the kind of individuals also we are trying to get to these international organizations, and pretty much we have made like we had also the late Dr. Ndugulile, Professor Janabi, and Deo Mapinga, who is currently leading the IGLC Parliamentary Forum based in Kinshasa. And these are the individuals also trying to connect us with this intergovernmental organization, but also trying to also help us export skills, especially the skills as part of what I call trade in services, but also exporting these services abroad.
Ambassador, do you have anything to respond to his
Why
comment?
is special status in a way better than dual citizenship? You know, there are some countries in the world that some of our citizens are there. They don't allow dual citizenship, such that if they take their Tanzanian citizenship, they lose the citizenship of the country they are in. I think I saw recently, and I smiled, the US administration, the president of the US, now is talking about, if you have dual citizenship, you have to make a choice. Which citizenship do you want? Do you still want to keep American citizenship or the citizenship of the country, the other country that you... So it means with special status, you can still keep your citizenship of the country you are in and enjoy the economic and social benefits of Tanzania. You see, the country that you had probably, and your parents or grandparents or great-grandparents are from. So the decision for this special class called special status was made after careful consideration of the potential risks that we might get into if we are to say the only option is dual citizenship. And then they live in countries that do not allow dual citizenship. They'll not be able to participate.
So I think we have to leave it there, gentlemen. And I think as much as the Tanzania's foreign policy has been revised over years, I think more considerations will be put on the issue of Tanzania as a diaspora. Now, let's discuss the issue of environment and climate change. Somebody might ask himself or herself, how important are these issues as far as the issue of economic diplomacy is concerned?
You know,
are they really important?
They are extremely important because of the risks that they're posing, but also the opportunities that they're also providing. To a large extent, when you talked about environment, especially if you look at 20, 30, 40 years ago, the conversations only around environmental preservation and to avoid environmental degradation. And of course, also its impact on economic activities. But now, even a larger scale negative impact is brought by climate change, which is beyond just environmental pollution. This is a systemic change of global weather patterns, global weather behavior, global temperatures that is caused by probably small scale over a long time environmental pollution. So now, our foreign policy appreciates that we have to first be part of international conversations, international discussions to regulate economic activities that are impacting environment or impacting climate. Why do we want? We want to determine the pace such that while we want to preserve environment, while we want to preserve the global climate, but also we do not want that to happen at a rate that is going to hinder our economic development. Also, we want the discussions at global level, and that's why we're also putting that in the foreign policy, to also identify areas that we need support as the global south, as African countries or as developing countries. And therefore, we want to tap into global resources that are available in the global discussions. And that's why, for example, now you're seeing our president, Her Excellency President Samia, is seen as a global leader, a global voice for developing countries, and especially for African countries, and especially women in the African countries who are largely involved in cooking, in terms of the clean cooking agenda, and the resources that are required to be put into the whole conversation to ensure that this energy transition discussion from fossil fuel to cleaner sources of energy is happening at a pace and at a rate that is going to help developing countries. So for us as Tanzania, I think it's not only our foreign policy priority, it's our national priority. It is something, it's an agenda that we want to take to continental and global level. And so far, I think our president has led conversations not only in Dubai during the COP, the council, the COP discussions, in Paris, in Brazil, and many other discussions that she has led is because now, as part of our foreign policy, environmental degradation, climate change are a priority, not only, as I've said, in terms of the impact, but also in terms of the resources that we want to tap into.
It's the issue of environment and climate change is a global agenda, as Ambassador has explained. What do you see economic potentials out of these two sectors that Tanzania could actually capitalize on?
Well, first, I think we need also again to remind our viewers that climate change governance, environmental governance, our clean energy, clean cooking energy diplomacy, our climate diplomacy and the economic diplomacy, they are inextricably linked. And they provide, of course, they present challenges, but also they provide enormous economic opportunities, especially when it comes to implementing projects that are geared towards climate change adaptation, mitigation, and resilience. One area of economic opportunity that this country can leverage on, first, of course, our climate change diplomacy and clean cooking energy diplomacy has risen the country's global profile, with our country now providing outstanding leadership when it comes to climate change and environmental governance in the global south. And actually, the special envoy and presidential advisor on climate change, the advisor of the President of the Republic of Tanzania, Dr. Richard Muyungi, currently leads, is the chair of the African Group of Negotiators to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change of 1982. So the economic opportunities that climate change present first in form of carbon trading.
Carbon trade, yes.
Yes, forest carbon trading in form of carbon offset and carbon credits. And actually the country, with the help of the Kingdom of Norway, established the National Carbon Monitoring Center, hosted at Suva, around 2016, as part of our RED policy, reduction of emission from deforestation and forest degradation. Again, we also have been receiving resources in order to support our initiative and the country's drive towards climate change mitigation, adaptation, and resilience, including projects like DMDP, that is a Metropolitan Development Project, but also Bus Rapid Transit, Dar es Salaam Rapid Transit, and the Msibazi Basin Development Project. These are all attracting resources in that area as part of enabling the country to leverage on that. But one of the challenges is that most of these climate change resources, they are coming in form of loans, not in form of, as part of, because we have been demanding climate justice in the form of loans. And this is a big challenge because it now increase these countries like Tanzania's public debt stock, which sometimes it might reach a sustainable level. And therefore, part of the country's diplomatic approach in negotiation when it comes to climate financing has been on a shift from a shift of focus from concentrating on loans to also providing official development assistance and grants so that these countries can adapt to climate change, because they have a marginal carbon footprint, but they bear the brunt and the catastrophe of the global climate change. And therefore, as part of climate justice, we need to close that gap. Another challenge has been that we have the rise of the neoconservative and far-right governments in the West, which actually are climate skeptics, and therefore we also need to invest also to mobilize resources also in the global south by bringing in countries like China and India, who are also major pollutants of the global environment in order to attract more resources, mobilize more resources.
Speaking of that, this actually brings me to the next question that I have. I'd like to put on the table. The issue of most of the developing countries trying to establish new international economic order in this multipolar world. How Tanzania's economic diplomacy policy in relation to Tanzania's new foreign policy has positioned itself to absorb whatever that can come on the way in this uncertain and unpredictable time.
Sure. First, if you look at the key pillars of our foreign policy, one that hasn't changed is what we call a non-aligned position. Now, when we say non-aligned, there's always a debate on what exactly does it mean. I remember a foreign diplomat representing their country here was saying, Tanzania is not non-aligned, it's multiply aligned. Means we are aligned to many. But what it means when you say non-aligned, and especially now, as you have rightly said, if you look at the global environment, it's what we call multipolar. It moved from a bipolar. You only have two dominant forces, and every other country was supposed to align with those. And then you had a group of non-aligned. We in Tanzania were amongst the staunch members of the non-aligned movement. And this is a position that we've maintained since independence to date. But it meant, and still means, we maintain the freedom and the dignity to engage with any partner internationally. Now, the beauty is the world moved from from bipolar to almost a unipolar when you only have one dominant power in the West, because the Eastern powers are a bit shaky. But now if you look at countries like China, if you look at countries like India, even if you look at countries like Brazil in the global south, if you look even a country like South Africa, their economic power is becoming increasingly significant. And their role in global economy in shaping global economic policy is also becoming significant. And therefore, you do not have a single center of power. You have various centers of power. Now, what the foreign policy, through a non-aligned, but also through prioritizing economic diplomacy, it gives us that power, and it has communicated to the world that we are free and we are willing to engage with any global power or any global partner as far or as long as we are aligned, we see eye to eye in terms of our economic interests. And that has benefited us. If you look at, we go into agreements with South Korea, we go into agreements, trade and investment agreements with India, we go into trade and investment agreements with China, with Russia. You could see recently the uranium project that was launched by Her Excellency is a Russian investment. But we are also still currently we are in a commercial dialogue with the United States. You see, we have one of our big investors is the United Kingdom. So we get the best from every part of the world because we prioritize our national interests and we are not aligned to one single power. So I think that's a huge benefit. And this is what it has helped us to leapfrog when it comes to the value of investments that have come to our country. If you look at the value of exports, because we also have been able to diversify our export domain a lot more. So I think we're in the right direction, and looking forward, I think we'll benefit a lot more from what is now called the multipolar world.
In case you've just joined us, this is Tanzania Today, and today we are discussing about Tanzania's economic diplomacy in relation to Tanzania's new foreign policy as Tanzania continues to exploit what foreign relations, foreign engagements could offer to the country economically. Issa Omar, do you think the multipolar world, the current multipolar world, gives an advantage to Tanzania the way it should deal in its foreign engagements to our own advantage?
I think it does, but we need to first, of course, bring up the policy debate, especially foreign policy debate when it comes to the notion or concepts of non-alignment and poly-alignment. Yeah? And as the ambassador has tried to cite that there has been a shift from bipolar, then unipolar, and then now we have in a polycentric world. And therefore, part of that debate has been that most of these countries are actually not non-aligned, but actually they are poly-aligned, because in the sense that there is still, and poly-alignment entails also trying to have a mutual engagement with different global players, as we know, a multicentric world where you have multiple centers of power, particularly with the rise of BRICS, which has resulted to reconfiguration of the international system. And there have been major sources of investment and major destinations also of investment. And also we have been also major destination, major source of tourists in our countries. And therefore, it tries also to help the country now trying to align with these multiple actors. Of course, the problem is still there that some of the relations that we enter with these global players has been that sometimes we receive even tied aid, which of course is predatory aid in one form or another. And therefore, this also brings the non-alignment concept and notion into question, which is why the scholarly debates has moved from non-alignment to poly-alignment, especially when it comes to study and also assessing and evaluating how Tanzania and other countries in the global south are behaving. So now the more opportunities are coming from the BRICS, and actually the group is enlarging year after year. Now we're just 10 members, and they present, as the ambassador said, investment opportunity, but also major source of tourists for the country. And therefore, this is part of an emerging international global economic order that shall try to challenge the hegemony of the West over the West. And therefore, Tanzania has to navigate strategically in order to leverage from both. Because we might say that we're in a multipolar world, but again, with the emergence of BRICS, and now we have G7, and the EU, we might even go back to the bipolar system, but in form of major global blocks.
Gentlemen, feel free, because we're discussing about one of the major components of Tanzania's economy. Yes, Ambassador.
This is an interesting discussion around non-aligned, poly-aligned. You know, the concept of alignment or aligned especially happens in United Nations framework, and especially where there are controversial resolutions that are put before especially the General Assembly or the Security Council or other types of bodies. And the alignment is whether you have unquestioned loyalty to this particular bloc. Whatever that is brought on the table by this particular bloc, you will vote with them. What these global powers appreciate from Tanzania is we will talk to you, we will smile with you, we will do business with you. But when it comes to those global positions, we retain our own position independent of any other relationship that we have. Such that, you know, if you become aligned to that extent, you can be told, if you don't vote with us, we will stop giving you this aid, we will stop giving you this type of support, you see. So Tanzania, all along and to date, sometimes they don't understand us because we are saying, this is our position. On this one, we remain neutral. On this one, we support this position. So that type of alignment, but increasingly because of our economic growth, economic independence, we are able to say that without even fear of retribution from these other big countries. So I completely agree with what we're also saying. The ability to engage with these many partners gives us more independence to portray and to amplify our global position on very critical issues, especially those related to wars that are happening, related to human rights abuses that are happening globally.
Mr. Omar.
When we step, if trying a bit just to historicize how this group of non-aligned countries and the concept of non-alignment, if we step back in time and look how it evolved, this concept, and later on became a group of countries. And the relation, the group of 77, now plus China, where we have more than 125 countries that act as a voting bloc, where on common issues of interest to them. But historically, the concept non-alignment is closely associated with the third world status. And these were groups. You have two worlds during the Cold War period, after the post-war era. You have the first bloc, you have the major global powers, the US and the former Soviet Union. And then the second bloc, now you have their allies who were satellite states, who were bandwagoning and trying to ensure balance of power in a bipolar system. And again, the third group, these were groups that were neither aligned with the West or the East by then, and trying to navigate this, try to avoid confrontation between the East and the West. And their focus has been on North-South dialogue when it comes to, they are demanding no international economic order. And actually they signed even the Charter on Economic Rights and Duties of States, trying to assert permanent sovereignty over natural resources. And this was the history. But over the years, since there has been a structural change in the international system after the fall of Berlin Wall in 1989 and the end of communism, that now the country gradually, now, for some point, we had a unipolar system. And most of the countries now were aligned to the US. And you can see how even our countries aligned to when the US declared the war on terror after 9/11, in terms of behavior. Within the UN, the United Nations General Assembly, even the United Nations Security Council. And actually, most of the countries that served the Security Council actually received more aid from the US because of trying to influence their voting behavior. So this has been changing with the change of the structure of the international system. So whether we have a non-alignment policy or a poly-alignment policy, is tied to the structure of the international system and how we navigate this structure. And so that is the context around the concept of alignment, which is what has been at the center of policy debate, especially with the coming of the Belt and Road Initiative, the new scramble for Africa, I would say, and then the US is also coming on the Atlantic with the Lobito Corridor, and how the countries now are trying to navigate, but also negotiate their interests within this, within the global power hierarchies. And therefore, they have to poly align that balancing the interests of this side and this side so that they don't become apparent proxies of this major global powers.
You have anything to... Because also I want us to discuss on the same line in terms of how Tanzania's foreign policy is ensuring a practical balance between our international engagements and our national values, interests. I don't know whether this one also is helping on that aspect as well.
You know, when you talk about foreign policy of any country, and let me talk about the one of our own country, it is an international projection of your national policies. You are communicating to the world. And that's why whenever there is a major change or a major shift of national priorities and national policies, you have to look at your foreign policy. What are you communicating to international community? So everything that we do, for example, one of the policy objectives or policy pillars of the revised policy is protection of our national values. What does it mean? We are telling the international community that we as a country, we have our national values that we hold so dear. So in our engagement with you, whether it is through trade, aid, or whatever, these are the things that we are going to protect with a lot of envy. With a lot of, so what are we saying? You're now hearing in some of the international discussions, whole discussions about sexuality, you see, and things of that sort. We are saying we have a position from our national values, from our culture, from our beliefs, from our religions. This is what we believe as a country. So everything that we communicate to international community, we are communicating them our national policy priorities and national policy pronouncements. And therefore, I do not see any contradiction. I'm seeing what we have done is to really align and enhance. For example, if you look at one of the other policy pillars or policy priorities, the 10 that you alluded to earlier, things like Kiswahili. Kiswahili is our national pride. So now we are saying we want to, some will call commercialize, but we want to internationalize Kiswahili. We want the international community to appreciate our cultural asset that we have. And when we talk about Kiswahili, and we have managed now to even make, there is an International Kiswahili Day, which is the 7th of July, declared by UNESCO. Now, when you look at what our embassies do to celebrate that, they don't talk only about the language, but the Kiswahili culture the cuisines, the dressing, you see, the dances, you see. So all that, so it means our foreign policy is carrying to international level the national values, the things that we hold dear, the national priorities, and the policy pronouncements.
Issa, the issue, do you think the issue of national interests, have they been well safeguarded to ensure that they're not being compromised through our Tanzania's economic diplomacy in relation to the new foreign policy?
Yeah, when it comes to the document, yes, but in practice, of course, that still be challenging because, you know, globalization unleashed three contradictory processes. One I cited earlier when we started the session about regionalization versus globalization. The second is homogenization versus diversification. And the third is homogenization, localization versus fragmentation. Fragmentation. These are the forces that are shaping global politics. Actually, the initiative of the Western liberal democracy has been the universalization of Western liberal forms of social, economic, and political values, homogenization, that in the sense of exporting them and universalizing them. That has been a major challenge that the country has come across over the years. And if you remember at one point, the former British Prime Minister, Donald Cameron, at Commonwealth Summit held in Perth, Australia, actually was demanding that this country, they should legalize it and decriminalize homosexuality and so on and so forth. So that has been a very challenging issue, but the country, of course, with this policy, they'll try to navigate that. But to navigate that, we have to ensure that we will assert control of our sovereignty and also becoming more and more self-reliant so that we do not end up in a condition where we are subjected to this kind of humiliation and dehumanizing acts. But integral to Tanzania's national value has been a humanistic civil culture, the primacy of human dignity, human equality, humanistic value, which is why Tanzania has been trying to contest some of the values that are imported from abroad. But again, when it comes to Kiswahili, which is also integral to that identity, because Kiswahili also embraces humanism as part of Ubuntu, Jamaa, familyhood, and so on and so forth, has been that trying to regionalize, Pan-Africanize, but also, I don't say internationalize, but globalize Kiswahili. And of course, we have managed to lobby the adoption, Kiswahili's adoption, SADC as a working language, AU, African Union, and again, even declared by UNESCO as well as UNESCO declared the International Kiswahili Language Day. But now the major challenge has been how now to convince the United Nations also to adopt it as one of the working languages. Because the new foreign policy attempts to use Kiswahili, because Kiswahili has been underutilized over the years, to use Kiswahili, not only international affairs, but also as a driver for economic diplomacy, as well as a soft power.
As a soft power as well. I would like to get Ambassador's comment on the area of national interests, how we safeguard them, but also there are some of the people that would, one way or the other, protest the way we do it. What would be your conclusion on that particular area?
No, you know, why is it important to have foreign policy that clearly stipulates what your national values are? This whole discussion about criminalize this, decriminalize this, while in other countries they're associated with individual leaders. You have given an example of what the former Prime Minister of UK did, but you could see the shifts happening in the United States, where the previous administration had a different position on homosexuality and things of that sort. The current administration has a completely different position. They're saying the only gender we recognize is either a man or a woman. So if we were to follow those type of positions, it means we'll also be moving this in that way. But when we have a firm position as a country, and this is a result of a serious interrogation of our national values, and say this is what we stand for, and this is what we communicate to the world. And it means that's not only a communication to the international community. It's a communication of consistency of the national leadership of what we believe in, what the country believes in, because also the national, the foreign policy revision was a result of serious consultation of people from across the country, from all walks of life, from religious leaders to young people, to women, to senior citizens. So it means that is a compilation of a consensus of what the country wants. Now, whenever you're protecting national interests, do not expect international consensus in protection of national interests. Our national interest, as I've said, now is first and foremost economic. We want our foreign relations to contribute to our economic growth, you see, and we want our representation abroad to be engaging at the forefront of international engagement on those economic interests of the country. But we want them to also communicate what our national values are, such that no aid could be tied to conditions that contravene our national values.
Ambassador Olanga, it's a great that you have spoken the issue of economic growth and the issue of our foreign missions as well. We would like to continue to discuss the two issues as we continue to explore Tanzania's economic diplomacy in relations to the Tanzania's new foreign policy. In the studio is the man who is in charge of Tanzania's economic diplomacy and renowned political analyst Issa Omar, as we continue to explore Tanzania's economic diplomacy in relations to the just unveiled and revised Tanzania's foreign policy. And we'll continue next Sunday on the same great television station right here on TBC1. I'm Nasa Kingu. Thanks very much for watching.